With unprecedented fines arising from Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and Sarbanes-Oxley Act violations, many companies are taking greater interest in internal controls. Internal controls are necessary to safeguard a company's assets and to ensure adherence to laws and regulations. Internal controls are processes designed to provide reasonable assurance regarding the achievement of secure operations and sufficient compliance. Internal controls should have 5 central components, starting with the control environment. This concerns corporate governance, whereby the board of directors is independent from management and conveys a strong tone at the top, or an ethical code of conduct that is clearly documented and implemented throughout the entire company. This is accompanied by employee training at all levels. The second component is risk assessment, which is the process of identifying and assessing risk and the necessary measures to mitigate risk. The third element consists of control activities, which comprises the policies and procedures at all levels of the company designed to prevent and detect fraud and corruption, including internal audit and due diligence with the capacity to screen for shell companies and monitor the activity of politically exposed persons. The fourth component consists of information and communication. There needs to be reporting mechanisms at all levels of the organization with the ability to swiftly and confidentially transfer concerns and suspicious activity reports to senior management. And finally, the last component consists of monitoring activities, which means the ongoing evaluation of a company's internal controls and compliance procedures. The actual corporate structure, mainly the centralization and integration of internal control systems across entities, is vitally important in the capacity of organizations to mitigate risk and prevent wrongdoing. Legal requirements for internal control are present within both the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and Sarbanes-Oxley. The Foreign Corrupt Practices Act has 2 central tenets: the anti-bribery provision and the accounting provision. The anti-bribery provision prohibits the offer, payment, promise, or authorization of payment of anything of value, directly or indirectly, to a foreign official with the intention to influence that official, an official action or decision, or to secure improper advantage. The accounting provision is divided into 2 parts: the books and records provision, which requires accurate and fair financial reporting, and the internal controls provision, whereby an issuer must implement adequate control systems to ensure proper accounting of all transactions as well as compliance within the anti-bribery provisions. The Act broadly applies to any domestic or foreign company registered with the SEC, including their foreign subsidiaries, as well as private companies incorporated or with significant activity in the U.S. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act supplements the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act by enhancing corporate compliance programs and heightening the internal control, reporting, and disclosing obligations imposed on publicly held companies. SOX also requires companies to disclose whether they have adopted a code of ethics. The case of Hewlett-Packard clearly demonstrates the importance of implementing adequate internal controls. According to the Securities and Exchange Commission, a lack of internal controls led to the company paying fines of more than $108 million in April 2014 to settle Foreign Corrupt Practices Act actions brought by the SEC and the Department of Justice. These charges were based on corrupt payments made by HP's subsidiaries of more than $3.6 million to Russian, Polish, and Mexican government officials. The fines they paid were substantial relative to the crime because, in addition to the bribery violation, they also violated the books and records provision by misstating the true nature of the payments and had inadequate internal controls to prevent such behavior. Essentially, HP was not only prosecuted for having made illegal payments to foreign corrupt officials and falsifying the record of these payments, but also for not having sufficient internal controls in place to detect and prevent the illicit activity. To ensure that HP is fully compliant with the FCPA and other anti-corruption laws, and that the company has implemented appropriate reforms to its internal control, HP was required to submit a report to the SEC describing its remediation efforts to date 1 year after the proceedings. In addition, the SEC mandated that HP undertake at least 2 annual follow-up reviews addressing comments made by SEC staff on the previous report in order to further monitor and assess whether the policies and procedures of HP are adequate enough to detect and prevent further illegal activity. Anytime a company is either investigated or prosecuted by the SEC and DOJ, their internal controls become widely scrutinized. This not only impacts the severity of fines imposed by the SEC, but can also hurt stockholder confidence. Further, the SEC and DOJ take a company's internal control systems, corporate governance, and codes of ethical conduct into account when determining the level of fines or mandates. Adequate internal controls make for best corporate practices and good corporate governance. Internal controls not only prevent criminal wrongdoing, which can damage a company from the inside, but also SEC and DOJ mandates and fines, which can cause shareholder and investor confidence, as well as stock prices to plunge. In addition, internal controls demonstrate corporate social responsibility, which is becoming vital to a company's reputation. Being out of control is no longer an option.